Good morning, everybody. Kalimera σε όλους. This morning, I'm going to bring a message in English, and I want you to listen carefully what I have to say, because what I'm about to say, it affects us in our everyday living, even under the situation of being locked down. And I want to have a look at some concepts and thoughts, how these ancient concepts and thoughts have influenced um, our morality, our thinking, our culture. And of course, I want to take you back to the ancient Greeks, their way of thinking, the biblical way of thinking, and how this uh, two thinking was integrated into today's um, philosophy and approach of life. Now, I know we're under uh, lockdown for another perhaps a week or two. Spare a thought of the Sydney people there, that they've been under lockdown for quite a while. And all of these lockdowns and this stress and this what's happening around us, the um, social restrictions, it's causing quite a few frictions among thinking people. Some don't care. They say, oh, well, whatever comes, comes. I don't really care. But some thinking people take these things seriously because the way it's going, it influences our lives, everyday lives, how we live in this planet Earth. And how do we approach all this thinking? Um, One of my niece recently, she posted this uh, a post about, let's take things in perspective. What's happening in Afghanistan, and thousands of people fleeing from uh, uh, from what it's about to happen to them, or what they're afraid could happen to them. And our lockdown, she said that it really, let's look at things prospectively, and let's not moan and groan about a few weeks or a few days on lockdown. Let's have a look at what's happening around the world. And it's true. I was sharing this with my wife this morning. I said, I remember that post that I saw. I walk into an op shop. I do buy some things from the op shop. I think sometimes it's great to recycle things. Um, and I saw this post on the wall. It says, "I complained that I had no um, uh, that I had no shoes until I saw somebody who had no feet." So you see what's happening there. Perspective. So the whole question and the whole argument with among the friends of my niece was, um, should this what's happening, should we have the freedom, the personal freedom, what's happening around us, it's imposing restrictions and all of that. And I wrote to the conversation, and I said, if I may here, sometimes the individual freedom, responsibility, and choice must give way to the collective good. You might think your liberty is above everything else and you're going in and out. It's your prerogative. But this unpredictable virus gets out of hand. If this unpredictable virus gets out of hand, thousands will end up in the hospital, just like in Brazil and England and India and USA. The ICUs will be filled up, and what type of freedom you're going to have to, if you yourself end up, or your loved ones end up in the hospital sick and dying. So there is the freedom the personal freedom and liberty and choice, and the collective good. Now, where do we get these thoughts from? Well, let me just take you back to the ancient Greece. Now, remember, and I'm sure you all heard and studied the Spartans and the Athenians. Now, the Spartans were the ones that the personal choice and liberty was restricted. Everybody, every young boy had to leave for the state. Now, does that sound familiar? Communism did that. Remember, where there was uh, no freedom of choice of anybody to walk above anybody else and do better things. Everybody had to work for the state, for the betterment of a collective body. And of course, that didn't work very well, didn't it? Oh, and of course, that Spartan um, philosophy and concept, it didn't work very well. It's sad, but I visited Sparta and Messenia not long ago with a biblical tour group, and we walked through Sparta and Messenian. That's where the ancient Sparta was. And I asked the tour guide, I said, "Where are the monuments of Sparta? Such a powerful state. We all know about the story of Leonidas and the 300 Spartans, how they fought for honor and for country." And he said, no, the Spartans didn't even believe in building walls. There are no monuments, there are no temples, there are no walls. Why? Because they believe the walls of Sparta was themselves. They would be the ones who would uh, protect the country. Of course, on the other hand, you have the Athenians. Now, I've been to Athens many, many times too, and I'm going to read a part of a few verses of the great visit of a great man of God, Paul, St. Paul, when he visited um, Areopagus, Mars here in Athens. So you had the Spartans leaving for the state, and then you had the Athenians who were the opposite. They were the individualistic. The individual was much in progress. The individual thinker was esteemed. So they really they didn't care so much about the state. They had the slaves, they had others to protect it, they had people who were paying. But the citizens of Attica or Athens, their main concept, their main way of surviving was their own personal thinking and personal ambition to be put above everybody else. So we had these two thinking, two concepts, the Spartans and the Athenians. So, why am I saying all of this? Because our Western civilization has been influenced greatly by Greek, the ancient Greek concept and thinking and philosophy. Now, of course, later on we have the Greco-Roman that took another spin on those things. But now let's stay here because I want to, before I read the scriptures, I want you to understand some things what is happening. So, in order for you to understand um, sociology and understand theology, hopefully, I'm not going to confuse you too much. Hopefully, you'll be able uh, to get something out of these. But this is a kind of for thinkers. If you don't want to listen to any way that will make you think, don't listen to me. But if you want that you can divulge into deeper thinking and find reasons and find answers, well, you can listen to me. Hopefully, I'm not going to confuse you. Hopefully, I will give you a bit more enlightenment on through the Holy Scriptures. Now, Apostle Paul, when he visited Athens, Athens was in its glorious days. Of course, the golden age had passed, but still the glory of Athens, what the Athenians built, it was still there. Now, Apostle Paul visited Athens around about 48 AD, and he says while he was waiting for some of his co-workers to arrive from Thessalonica, they his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given to idols. It was full of idols. Every corner of Athens, just like now, if you go to Greece, every corner there's a little chapel, there is a little eklisaki or paraklisi or a church or a chapel, and all of those dedicated to some um, a few of the saints. Now, it was happening back then. He said that therefore he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshippers in the marketplace, in the agora, as the Greeks call it. He would go there. There was no Christian church. Now imagine in 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 the whole of Europe and Greece, of course, and Europe, Greece is part of Europe, there were no Christian churches. Paul was the first one who brought the gospel, the multi polytheistic belief, the Olympian gods and the other gods in all other up north of the Germanic tribes and the Anglo-Saxon. They were all believe in paganistic gods and goddesses and all of that. There were no Christian churches. There was no Christian literature. There was no Christian morality. There was no Christian music. There was nothing Christian. You might say, well, that's unbelievable. That was Europe. Now, Apostle Paul is the first one who brings the gospel and brings enlightenment and brings the way of the salvation. He comes to Athens and he said that there was something angst him, something depressed him, because he saw in every corner many, many idols. In fact, the Greeks believed and worshipped thousands of gods, around about 3.5 demigods and gods and muses and all of those. For every country and every mountain and every sea and every valley, there was a god in a small g. Now, and there, when he happened to be there, certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encouraged him and said, what does this, encountered him, I'm sorry, and said, what does this babbler want to say? Anyway, you know what happened. They invited him to the Mars Hill, the Areospagos. Now, what is Areospagos? The Mars Hill, it was kind of the Parliament House. That's where people would go and discuss and decide. Now, remember, the Athenians got rid of the monarchy, got rid of the kingdom. Remember what I said from the beginning? Because the individual uh, uh, worth was above the state. Athenians were not like the Spartans. Now, remember that. Now, uh, and Paul encounters these philosophers, and I want to talk to you about this. What do these philosophers stand? And watch and listen carefully, because you will see and you will discover that their way of thinking has been integrated and been carried over into the Western civilization and carried over to our way of thinking as well. That's how powerful the Greek concept and the Greek philosophy and the Greek culture was. Now, when Paul arrived in Athens, let me just give you a few concepts and thinkers and philosophers that existed back then, and how they had influenced Greece and even the Roman world, and later on the whole world. Now, Aristotle, let's have a look at Aristotle, for example, who was born not far from where I was born and grew up there, became, as you know, the tutor or the teacher of Alexander the Great. Now, um, Aristotle believed in the logical concept of things. He believed that the five senses that we possess, we experience the world through these five concepts, these five senses. This is called empiricism. Empiricism comes from the Greek word meaning experiencing things through the five senses. With other words, what's real, it can be discovered and can be lived through our five senses. So that's what Paul encountered, the Aristotelian, or the what it is called the empiricism concept. Then there was another one, and when I mention to you, you most likely you will know it was Plato. Now, what did Plato teach? Now, remember, Plato was the pupil or the student of Socrates, great philosophers. Now, he developed what we call rationalism. He said, yes, the five senses, as Aristotle taught, they are very good and true, but we have a soul. We must look at the metaphysical world. That metaphysical world is a mirror. It shines into this world what exists over there in the unseen. So you can say what he was teaching, you are happier person if you hold on to your senses and your logic, but also add into your thinking and into your concept the metaphysical, just like Aristotle did. I'm sorry, Socrates did. Aristotle believed in the logic, but he thought it was just an impersonal universe. Really, there was no God. Now, then we find the Epicureans. The Epicureans were the ones that Apostle Paul encountered at Athens. And let me just tell you what they believed. In the Gospel of Luke, and in the book of Acts, which was written by Luke, by the way, Luke takes a very closer look to these two groups, that they were the dominant groups and the dominant thinkers in the days of Apostle Paul, the Epicureans. The Epicureans uh, are the ones that they said, look, don't worry about the metaphysical, don't worry about what exists after this world. It is the now. It is how you live, and uh, don't try to please the gods. I've heard that many times in my life. Look, I don't live to please God. I live to please myself. Now remember, that's the Athenian concept. Well, they said, they used to say this in the Greek: "Phae, pie ke phreno, avrion apothniskis." What does that mean? It was saying, let's eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. So for them, the pleasure of life, it was enshrined and embedded in this, in one word, hedonism, pleasure seeking. Do you hear that in your life today? Many people, they say, don't worry about it, just be happy, just find a way to for pleasure, and that is the most imperative thing in your life. Don't worry about what others think. Don't worry about what God thinks. Don't worry about morality. That is not going to get you anywhere. Or the Christian faith. The Christian faith, many people say, it restricts you, your happiness. Remember, Freud said that religion it restricts the happiness of of, uh, and pleasure seeking of a person. Now, the Epicureans were there. The Apostle Paul encountered them. Then there were other people. One more or couple of more groups that it's mentioned. It said Stoics were there. The Stoic philosophers. Now, who were the Stoic philosophers? The Stoic philosophers had their father philosopher. His name was Zeno. Now, Zeno, who was against hedonism, against living for pleasure. He was more of a Spartan. He was saying, no, restrain, control of your emotions, of your desires, control of your thinking, control of your anger and your revenge, control of all of those things. That will bring a, a glorious end in your life, because you're going to live not for yourself but for others. Now that's not doesn't sound too bad, does it? So Stoicism was repressing emotions, repressing thinking, and he was saying, look, just live for the glory and for the honor of others. That's why even today we say that person is very stoic. He doesn't show emotions, with other words. You know, the five uh, characteristics of personalities: the phlegmatic, the stoic, and all of those. Now, then we have the last one, which I want to quickly mention to you. When Paul was preaching and he came to Athens to preach the gospel of Jesus, all these concepts, all these philosophers, all this way of thinking, which penetrated the the Roman and Greek world, and became a way of influencing even the early Christian thinkers, the early Christian theologians. The last one is dualism. Now, what is dualism means? Now, dualism means that what these philosophers were saying, that in life there is tension in everything. There is light and there is darkness. There is evil, there is good. There is up, there is down. There is all these tensions, and all these tensions keep the universe going and keep us. Therefore, they came into the conclusion, Christ, yes, he brought that type of enlightenment, light, but the Old Testament, it's all about the evil. It's all about the dark side of human beings and the dark side of God. Dualism, therefore, believes that God has two sides. Okay, one is light and darkness, truth and lie, evil and good, and all of that. Okay, so that type of thinking influenced the um, uh, the early Christians, and unfortunately, they in the writings you will find that Augustine and Tertullian and others, the early Christian fathers, um, that dualism had penetrated in their thinking, and instead of start thinking biblically, they start thinking Greek. You might say, well, what's wrong with thinking Greek? Well, I think in Greek. Many times people ask me, do you think in English or in Greek? And I said, that's a good question. Sometimes I think in Greek, sometimes I think in English. But that's not, I'm not talking about the mental faculties here, that how makes us thinking, but what is the concept? What is our philosophy? What is our worldview? How is that affected? Now, let me just give you quickly a few things so you can understand how the Greek view the world. Now, remember, the Greek and the Christian thought has influenced the world more than anything else in the world. The Greek thinking, especially in the Renaissance days. Remember, in the Enlightenment days, as they call it, in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, where we have great men rising up and embracing the neoclassic Greek um, in architecture, in literature, and that's why in the 1785, the French Revolution that came, and they started embracing not so much the monarchy, ruling over them in a monolithic way, and and personality and liberty and all of that diminished. But they started rising up, said, no, the individual. And where did they find all of this? In the Greek writings. And that's the reason they helped the Greeks later on, the French and the English and Germans, to Russians, to rise against the Ottoman Empire in 1821. Now, they loved the Greek thinking, they loved the Greek concepts, they loved the Greek culture and the writings and the tragedy and the comedy and the science. So that way of thinking and what they uh, rediscover in the Renaissance, we have the Greek thinking coming back again, and Christian thinking slowly dwindling. And now we know in Europe, for example, even though they call themselves a Christian nation, a Western civilization, with a Christian moral and principles, yet very few are Christians. Very few attend church. Very few believe in the Christian morality. Very few believe what Christ has offered and how uh, uh, he died for mankind. They kind of swept it under the carpet and just ignore it. And so we have a Europe right now, European culture, a godless culture with no Christian influence anymore. In England, only about 3% attend church. In France, just about the same. Now, in Greece, of course, in Greece, people say in the latest census, they said 89% they say they believe in God. Just imagine, nearly 90% of the Greeks. But when the question is, where is God in Greece? I've seen it. There is no Christian faith there. Pretend to be Christians, and I'm sorry, I'm not having a go at any Greek Christian here. They think they're Christians, but they're far from the Christian truth. The immorality, the way they live, the way what they're doing, the stealing and the all of the anti-Christian attitude and culture that has been developed. Yes, they still say they're Christians, but it is just in their minds, not in a practical way of love and justice and peace and forgiveness and living a moral and upright life as Christ did. Now, the Greek philosophy, therefore, uh, had nature. Let me just give you a small comparison here, as generating force. Now remember, Aristotle was saying that, operating according to its own closed system of laws and acting independently of any authority. That's the Greek way of thinking, and many people still believe the same, even in Greece. But the Christian believes there is a creator. There is a creator who generated, who a personal generator, a personal creator who created the universe and created all this with design, and he sustains it, not nature. Yeah, I hear many times, oh, Mother Nature, Mother Nature. Who is Mother Nature? Can Mother Nature create things? Mother Nature just recreate what was created for by a creator, by an architect. Nature, the Greeks believe, is God, and God is nature. This pantheistic belief. All that is natural, the supernatural simply does not exist. The Ionian thinking. Remember? There is no God. You hear that so much these days. There is no God. Don't worry about it. You just live for 60, 70, 80, 90 years, you die, that's the end of it. Wrong. You have an immortal soul in you that was created by God, and one day you have to present it back to God. It's not yours to keep. You have to present it back to God. Now, the Hebrew or the Christian way of thinking is God is always creative. He's creating things. He must not be confused with the creation. Many people say, well, God is nature. No. If you go further down, Apostle Paul confronts the Romans and he said, no, the creation, the sun and the moon and the mountains and all of those, the trees and all the seas are not God. God created all these things according to the Christian belief. Now, man is, according to the Greek, and even today, how many times you hear that? You hear man is classified as an animal, distinguished by the specific differences. Man is a rational animal. Now, Aristotle that said that. What he was saying is what makes a human being different is just his logic, not his immortal soul and immortal, created in the image, in the likeness of God. He said there is now nothing of personal God. Nature is God. But the Christian belief is man is differentiated from other animals. He's unique in living in with other things, and he was created by God himself. Now, the Greeks also believed, and I will finish with this very soon, man's appearance on earth is a result of an impersonal, non-rational act of force called nature. No purpose is involved. No meaning of existence is given. Mother Nature is silent. You've heard this so many times, that no purpose, nothing to live for. And can I just pause here for a minute? Why is it that this concept, this thinking has influenced our young people, and over 60,000 every year in Australia try to commit suicide, and many of them succeed? Why? That's only a bracket between 18 and 40. But this is the youth of trying to commit suicide. You know why? Because this Western thinking and culture that has been taught from young teen to and even younger, from the kindergarten, that we are a product of the nature of evolution, therefore there is nothing to live for. There is no God, there is no purpose. And that is the reason the young people take a syringe and take an overdose and take a gun and take and go and hang themselves and die, because this is the way of thinking. But the Christian approach is man's appearance on earth is premeditated by a personal, rational being, a deliberate and decisive act of intelligence and purpose. With other words, the Christian faith brings this living hope, this living purpose, not just for this earth, but for eternity. Now, listen to what Apostle Paul, after he told the people there, the philosophers who brought him and called him up to the parliament house of Mars Hill of Areopagus, and he expounded himself, and he told them in theological ways and in philosophical ways all about this unknown God. Now remember, the Athenians came to the point where they said, well, you know what, all these Olympian gods and living among the livers. It's just a fantasy. It's just a legend. It's nothing really. It's not the truth. But, they say, there must be, beyond those Olympian gods, the known gods we know, there must be a force that is called the unknown God. Now, they had even a big altar near there, and on there it was inscribed these words, to the unknown God. Apostle Paul took that as a way of bringing the living message of Christ to them. And he said to them, okay, you believe that there is unknown God above all gods. I agree with you. But he said, do you know who that is? It is Jesus Christ. Now, he says, therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone. Remember what I said? That the gods of the Greeks were anthropomorphic. With other words, it represented themselves with gold and silver and precious stones and all of that. And he said, and Apostle Paul said, no, God is not like that. He said, but I tell you what, he said, truly this time is of ignorance. God overlooked this unknown God that you believe. He came to the point now where he said, enough is enough. I will reveal the truth to them. Now remember, the Greek philosopher will preach that the truth is discovered with the logic. Now Apostle Paul says, truth is revealed by faith. There's two different concepts, and on one day I'll talk about this. Now he says, he sent this Christ, a righteous man who came, who died, and through his resurrection he brought hope to all mankind. And strangely enough, the Epicureans, well, not surprisingly, and the Stoics and all the other philosophers, they started laughing. They said, what are you talking about? Once you die, you die. How can Christ come back to life again? You know why? That shatter all the thinking. It shatter all the beliefs that there is no metaphysical reason to live for. And Paul reveals to them, he said, yes, there is. It is Christ who died, who came as a man, who came as a human being. He was incarnated. This is the Logos, as John in the Gospel and always uses the Greek Aristotle way of referring to God. This Logos became part of us, became a human being, and we saw him, and we lived with him, and we heard him, and we saw him dying on the cross, and then we saw him alive. That's what I'm bringing to you, Athenians. There were a few who believed, not many. Remember Dionysius, the Areopagite? Became the first Christian there. He was part of the Areopagus, a parliamentarian. The church started in Athens, and they're still Christians after 2000. I leave you with these thoughts. Start thinking as a Christian, not as a Greek. Yes, you can be a Greek and be proud of who you are, but sweep away all those ancient Greek concepts and philosophy. They are not going to help you. But the Christian faith is going to give you hope and purpose, love and peace in this life and eternity. God loves you, and I love you. I leave you in his merciful hands for peace and love and joy.